Well, good morning, everybody, and certainly appreciate inviting us here to speak to you about the post-legislative session. I think you remember when we were here last time, or when we spoke last time about what was getting ready to happen in the General Assembly. I told everybody, I said, if it's political and you're Republican in the House or the Senate, it's going to die, and that happened. So anything that was politically related from our side, or if it had any type of governor, agency, bill related matter, and they sniffed it out, it died. I had one that, it was a simple fix in the code. They found out that it was coming from the governor's office, and they didn't even vote on it. They pocketed it. And I sat there going, when is my bill going to get heard, as I sat in the waiting area. So that's some of the games that were going on from the General Assembly side. Can we say defense? Defense, defense, right? So that's pretty much what we tried to do. We tried to play as much defense as we could so that we could at least give the governor, hey, notice, this is a bad bill. We need your help as a backstop. And certainly, as Mr. Phelps mentioned, we have him as a backstop, and it's nice to have him there in terms of vetoing bills, and certainly that's what he did. The minimum wage, of course, was a big one for the farmers. They tried to pass that. They tried to pass it for the business side. It got killed by the governor, but it'll be back. Everything that he's vetoed, they'll bring it back next session, business related. Speaking to your side of the game, it'll come back next session, I guarantee you that. But fortunately, we have him there. So we talk about big item, right? I-81, of which the folks in the General Assembly in the Valley, we try to do some backdoor or behind the scenes negotiations to try to help promote 81 funding. Because the reality of it is we don't have the funding. We don't have a tax district. We do have a gas tax, but it only does so much. And as you know, we won't get our projects until the end of this decade, 2030s, when we get a shovel in the ground in this area, 2031 actually. And that's too late. That's not acceptable. So with the governor's monumental deal, we thought, hey, maybe it's an opportunity for us to talk to him about that. So when we talked to him individually, he asked us to come talk to him about it. And we did. And he basically said, hey, what do you think? And we're like, we really don't care about your deal. We think it's a great deal. The structure of the deal is a neat deal, but it doesn't do anything for us in our neck of the woods. And he's like, well, how can I help you? And I said, well, let's do something for funding for 81. How about some residual operating revenue off that to pour into a revenue stream for 81? So that was the message. And you don't know this, but we had $100 million in there for an annual revenue driver for 81 in that deal. And unfortunately, the Senate made it political, and they killed it. And so I'm blaming everything on Timmy, though. But anyway, that was one of the things we tried. The other deal that was behind the scenes was the skill games. And believe us, we are not in favor of any type of gambling. It's just not what we believe in, our morals, our principles. Unfortunately, we don't have casinos in this neck of the woods. And maybe some of you saw some flyers with my mugshot on it, telling Delegate Wiley to vote against the skill game bill. I don't know if you saw it or not. But I was telling the casinos, hey, I'm going to vote for this. And you know why I wanted to vote for this? Because we had 10% of revenue coming off the skill games, a dedicated revenue stream to go to 81. So the revenue off of skill games projected, now it's been amended by the governor and it's going to be crimped based on what he's changing. But what we calculated was it was $200 million per year in skill games. These are the things you see in the convenience stores and the like. We wanted to put enough guardrails around it. But we also wanted to benefit the localities. We wanted the sheriff's department. We wanted the teachers to benefit. And we wanted money for 81. So with that, we had 10% of revenues coming off that. So that's about $30 million that we could bond on a yearly basis. We could put more projects into the 81 system. That's still in play. That's still in play. We got to go back Wednesday to try to get that thing through. But that's what I'm working on to try to get going for 81. And we continue efforts, creative efforts, if you will, to try to put revenue into that massive. I mean, 81 is a huge project. It's massive. But if we can put more revenue related funding opportunities to assist in that improvement of 81, it's important. Fortunately for me, the Speaker of the House, Don Scott, put me in a position to serve on appropriations, and I'm blessed to be serving, and that brings opportunity for us. So when I ask for money, I kind of have a seat at the table, and I'm blessed to be there, and I look forward to hopefully helping out us in our neck of the woods for funding. Another thing we did for 81, I just wanted to finish up with that. We also took, so when they do 81, let's say if a project's been funded, it's a 6-year plan, but it takes 5 years for it to get a shovel in the ground. 5 years. So what we did was we put in the appropriations, we put an amendment in there, and I'll read it to you. It clarifies the improvement of let's see, where's the amendment? Language amendment provides a limited exception to the code to allow for projects in 81 corridor to move forward with preliminary engineering and any right-of-way activities, even if all the funding can complete the project is not in the 6-year plan. So what we're doing is we're taking that 5-year timeline and we're crimping it. We're basically cutting it in half. So once it gets funded, instead of waiting 5 years, we can do it in 2. So that's another thing we tried to do for 81. Another thing we did for transportation, and this is another committee I serve on, we have a bill, HB 774 was carried by Delegate Reed over the mountain. Clarifies the improvement of non-surface treated secondary highways, includes improvements other than paving as described in the bill. So as you know, there's a lot of gravel roads that are VDOT owned. And so we're trying to put funding in there to improve some of these roads that are in our county. So that's another thing we did to help out on that end. I do want to say that we had one bill that was just terrible for small business. I can't emphasize how I think Delegate Bloxham said it was on our text chain. It said it was the worst bill he's ever seen. And he's a very smart, savvy businessman who's on appropriations with me and really understands the game. It was the Paid Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program. I don't know if, Josh, you brought this up with him or not, but this is just a terrible bill, and I'm going to read it to you. It basically would bankrupt small business. Requires the Virginia Employment Commission to establish and administer a paid family and medical leave insurance program and benefits beginning January 1, 2027. Under the program, benefits are paid to covered individuals as defined in the bill for family and medical leave. Funding for the program is provided through premiums assessed to employers and employees beginning January 1, 2026. The bill provides that the amount of a benefit is 80% of the employee's average weekly wage, not to exceed 80% of the state weekly wage, which amount is required to be adjusted annually to reflect changes in the statewide average weekly wage. The bill caps the duration of paid leave at 12 weeks in any application year and provides self-employed individuals the option of participating in the program. Why would I want to come back to work, but you're going to pay me? Not good. That got killed by the governor, thank God. But it's going to come back. So in a nutshell, and I'll shut up now and let my colleagues fill in where I didn't fill in. I'm sure there's more to fill in. Bad news, defense. We did get good education funding in there that the governor played along with. Any of the budget requests that we had that made it through on our side, the governor certainly pushed them through, thankfully. But I can say in a nutshell, it was hard. I told people in the General Assembly, I said, happy hour at my office starts at 3 o'clock, not 5 o'clock. That's how bad it was. Because we got to the point where none of the lobbyists were coming to us because we were in the minority. They were going to the ones that get stuff done. So we were sitting there just going, hey, all we're going to do is push the no button. And that's pretty much what we did. Like I said, if it wasn't political, or if it didn't have anything to do with, with minimum wage or anything like that, we did try to work with the other side. It's not like we're completely at odds the whole way through. We are amicable. We try to work on the other side as best we can. But when it comes to matters in our area, the rural versus the urban dichotomy, we have major issues, and that will continue. But we will continue to fight for you and your interests in the business world. But it wasn't pretty, and I think you know that. But we'll continue to fight the fight, and we're blessed to have the governor on the backside. And I'll yield my time back to Delegate Oates.
So this was my first session ever, so you don't know what you don't know. And when you get there, you are surprised at what you don't know. And so my first session, I sat there, and the speaker, of course, is the opposite party. So he gets to determine what committees you serve on. So the day the committee list was distributed and they announced it, there was no Dolores Oates. And I thought, who the heck did I tick off already? I haven't been here long enough to make somebody mad. And so I was the forgotten delegate. That's going to be the title of my book when I'm done with this, by the way. And so we went to the speaker, and he was very apologetic. And the next day, I was assigned to public health or public safety, and it's the local, which is counties, cities, and towns, because as some of you know, I served on the Board of Supervisors, and so a lot of the decisions that are being made in the counties, cities, and towns will have way more impact on you than probably any of some of the other legislation outside of the minimum wage. The reason is that counties, cities, and towns decides on what localities can zone, how they operate, and so it's a big deal to sit on this committee. And I'm going to give you one that they tried to get through, which just blew my mind. But there are many localities in rural Virginia who do not want solar fields or farms in their area, and they've made that decision through comprehensive plans. There was a bill that was being pushed through that would force them to give solar a hearing, regardless of your comprehensive plan. So that was a big no. I just want you to know that I spent the majority of the time in the red. I pushed that no button so much that sometimes I thought I was going to push it more often than it needed to be, because that was the kind of session that we had this year. I was amazed to see the sausage making. Bill calls it sausage making. So I was amazed to see the sausage making behind the scenes, because there are a lot of conversations that are going on to try to negotiate with the other side. But we've got to get to the point where we're the majority. That's just what I want to tell you. That's my biggest message today. If we didn't have a governor writing the most vetoes or vetoing the most legislation, all of this stuff would become law on July 1. You would have to have lived in that family medical leave. You would have had to have abided by minimum wage. We would not have a choice, but he has been a buttress to the changing of the way we do business in Virginia. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to make sure that the next governor does the same thing. It is so important to us. Some of the other things, as Bill alluded to, if you were in the minority party, then you couldn't get anything through. I carried 8 bills. They all died in some form or fashion. But I do get to take them back next year. So there's always hope, right? You get to take them back and maybe craft them a little differently or create a little different argument. I carried a couple of bills for the Attorney General, and I carried a couple for the governor. And the minute that they figure out that you are representing the administration, they will find a reason to pass by indefinitely is the term they use. That's probably the most critical way that they can kill a bill, which is we're going to pass by indefinitely, which means we don't ever want to hear this again. So I carried one that I thought was a no-brainer, which was providing parents the ability to know what the data collection is going on in schools on these Chromebooks. Your kids are out on the internet all day long with their Chromebooks. doing research, doing other things, and there is a constant data collection going on. And all we wanted was for parents and kids even to know, what is the data that's being collected through that process? It didn't pass. They killed it. And I thought that was a no-brainer. That was easy, right? We're just going to provide the data. You don't have to hire people. There's no fiscal impact. It died. So that was some of the experience we've had. Being in the minority party means, you can expect that most of your bills are going to get a big no. Now, if they were, if they weren't political, or if they thought that it was a good bill, they either stole it. They did a lot of that to us too, by the way. So you would see bills that were exactly like your bill coming up on the other side, and of course they would take that one up. So this is the benefit of being in the majority, which is why we have to get back the majority. So those were some of my experiences. The budget process, I'm not on appropriations, so I was only an outsider looking in, but I will never vote to increase taxes on Virginians in an inflationary environment when we have billions of dollars in surplus. It's crazy. I couldn't believe that was even considered by the other side. And they wanted so the governor took out of the budget that we're going to reconsider next week, taxes on digital products. And this means that if you currently watch Netflix, if you're currently watching Hulu or whatever your subscription is, you would get a monthly tax on that subscription. Because right now, Virginia doesn't do that. So that was proposed, and that was going to create $1.8 billion the first year and probably another billion the second year. So $2.8 billion. But the governor's proposal was to lower income taxes, as Josh said, to compete with our neighboring states because we're losing people. We are. Virginia is losing population. And the reason is that Tennessee doesn't have any income tax. North Carolina has lower taxes. So people are migrating out of Virginia. And not to mention that business is difficult to do in Virginia because the regulatory environment is onerous. So we have a lot to fix, but we can't fix it unless we're in the majority. I enjoyed being a part of it. I am so honored to serve in the oldest operating legislature in the Western Hemisphere. I was awestruck. I sat there in tears my first day because I was sitting where this whole experiment began. This American experiment began in Virginia, and I had the honor to sit in the building that Thomas Jefferson designed. You can't describe that, and I'm so honored. I'm going to fight the good fight. I'm going back. We'll see what I can do as I kind of learn the process, but I've got my boxing gloves on. So anyway, thank you.
So, like Dolores, it was my first session, and there's just so much to learn when you're over there. There's procedures, and they work, and you need to learn them. And so like she said, on the bills, when they get passed by indefinitely, that would be okay if that's how they said it. This comes up in your committee meetings. This doesn't come up on the floor. This is in the committee. They don't use words in Richmond. They only use letters, and it's PBI, okay? Well, I know what PBJ is. That's peanut butter and jelly. All right, so they're saying PBI, and I'm voting the wrong way, and I'm voting for it, and we got to re-vote. And so it took me about 2 weeks to get my feet underneath of me because, it could be a Republican thing that I am for, and you think you're voting for it, but you're voting for PBI, and you're killing your buddy's bill. So we got to redo it. So we're having fun. They're picking on you, and it's all neat, but. Back to the crazy stuff, Bill went over some of the things. I don't know that we need to hash a whole lot, but just the sentiment that we're dealing with. I was on social services and rehab, and I think we probably had somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 bills that came to us that basically strengthen the renter's ability to stay in a property at the expense of the owner of the property. It's basically just every one of them. And, you know, I tried to explain to the people across the aisle who, you know, they just feel that, you know, like the minimum wage, to me, it's not a living wage, it's a beginning wage. It's to teach young people how to work, or to teach someone who's from one profession that wants to have a second job, but they know nothing about it, to come in and learn that job, you know. So that was my goal, to try to educate them. But it's the same way with these renter landlord, you know, property right type deal. All we hear in Richmond is affordable housing. I mean, I think it's probably one of the most, you know, they just feel like, well, all these laws that they keep cramming down landlords' throats that make it harder to, you know, get someone out of your property that's either not paying their bills or beating up their your house or whatever. It just makes it to the point where you don't want to do that anymore. You know, so let's agree that we don't need a property management that is solely, you know, focused on just profits, that they don't have some regard for the well-being of their tenants and making sure that they provide them with a livable place and responsible fixing leaks and you know, things like that. I understand that, but you can't take this segment of our country, which is, you know, people who work hard, maybe buy a starter home at a young age, and they move into another home, and they want to keep that second home as a revenue stream, and make it to where they have to accept a pet because, you know, it's a companion animal. We understand those things. Some people can keep a pet in my house and it's not offensive to me, but there's some that can't. And if they're not that way, I ought to be able to get rid of them. You know, when they're late on their payment, I should be able to say, you know, it's time for you to move on. I shouldn't have to be a banker and set up a payment program for them to pay my back rent back. You know, another new thing, I don't know if any of y'all have rental properties, but now I think it's a law that was passed maybe 2 years ago. I think Bill voted for it maybe. But in these towns, no, I know he didn't. In these where we have municipality water, when we have a tenant that moves out of our property and they have a back water bill, the owner of the property has to pay that. I never used a drop of that water, you know. These are the kind of things that are taken, you know, these bills come and they take the strength out of especially rural America. So we could talk on many things. I had a few, it is complicated over there. You know, it came to me about a prescription affordability board. Okay. Hey, I live in an area where we have a lot of people that are on fixed incomes, and I hear a lot of you all and a lot of other my constituents talk about the price of their medicines and things like that. So sitting down thinking that I want to be supportive of that, but I'm the type person, I'm going to hear both sides. And we can call it big pharma or whatever you want. I don't want to say that in a negative way, because I know there is some negative way with big pharma, but the lobbyists come in and said, listen, what you need to understand about this Prescription Affordability Act is we can show you 5 states, and Maryland being the closest, that have been doing this for some years now and have done nothing. They, you know, because the price that we pay for our subscriptions is not only dictated by big pharma, okay? You have the retailers in there, you have insurance companies in there, and it is just pretty complicated. So I don't know if you all worked on that one any or not, but you know, it's more than we want to make sure we're getting reasonable prices for our prescriptions, because there's a lot of players in the game. It's not just them saying what you and I are going to play. So that's something I think we're going to work on. It didn't pass. I think the governor vetoed it. And that's some stuff we need to try to make sure that we're living in an environment with our prescriptions that are responsible, I think is the best way to do it. And so there's a lot of stuff over there that we're working on. Of course, you all know my love is agriculture. I'm going to leave you with a little story. I don't know in the House, on the delegate side, how they do it, but there's a lot of razzing that goes on the Senate side. And in the beginning, getting you introduced, getting you comfortable with your, everyone in the Senate. And so once we were sworn in, and then another senator goes around and introduces the new senators to the body. And Mark Obenchain introduced me. And that's the one thing I want to say. This transition from last year, I was standing up here, and I've never had a public vote casted for me at that point. And I now am very grateful and honored to represent this district. I really do feel privileged to represent you all. But I moved into a situation that was represented by two of the most respected senators in the state of Virginia, and Mark Obenchain and Jill Vogel. And you don't know how easy that is, because I didn't have to beat somebody out, but I took a seat from that both of them represented, and everybody really took to us, which helps when we're working on issues that matter to this district. But anyway, Mark introduced me and told him that I was a farmer. Some of y'all may have heard that Jill and I went to high school together, enjoyed growing up together, so they had a big time with all that. And he told about our farm and that we have dairy cattle, we have beef cattle, and we have chickens, and actually our chickens that we grow, Chick-fil-A serves. We grow for Georgia's Family Farms, and that's there in Shenandoah County and Rockingham County, and Chick-fil-A is now who we grow for. And so afterwards, we're going around shaking everybody's hands, and it was a Democrat senator, and it was a male. One that said, I want to talk to you about these chickens. He said, do you all butcher those chickens on your farm? I said, no. I said, there's 130,000 of them things ready on the same day. I said, they go to a factory. I mean, it's big business. And I said, it's really complicated. Chick-fil-A only sells white meat. Y'all know that? They only sell white meat. They only sell the breasts, the tenderloins, and the chicken nuggets. And I said, then you got the dark meat that you got to deal with. But they want to have total control of growing their chicken, their quality control. They don't want someone else in there, ending up with this or that. They want to know what they're going to end up with. So we're talking about it, and I said, Chipotle only sells dark meat. You would think those two companies would get together. So finally he goes, well, if they don't want to have dark meat, why do they raise dark meat? Folks, we're talking about an adult. We're talking about somebody that represents 250,000 people in this state. And they don't know that. He said, I often wondered why they asked if I wanted dark meat or white meat. Okay? This is what we're working with on the other side. Okay? Y'all want to know why things are crazy? They don't know. So we could tell these stories all day long. All right? I'm going to leave you with one thing. We're safe in this district. Both of these guys, the Republican Party, our values, what we stand for, are safe. All of us could get challenged by someone with our same views and might lose our seat. We understand that. But we're not going to lose it to a Democrat currently, unless we, really mess up. But in 2 years, we're going to have a statewide campaign for a governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and these people right here. We got to support them. But we all know people that live over that mountain. And on a statewide race, we have to get those people that we know helping this situation. We got to explain to them, send money to your Republican candidate you support, put signs in your yard, let your children know how important this is, because if hopefully we can gain the delegate majority back, okay? That's what we're working for, and we're gonna work hard for that. But we got to get that governor, that lieutenant governor, that attorney general. We got to keep those seats. And we can do whatever we want over here and stay in our own little nucleus. But if we don't reach out to these urban areas and get the votes that we can get out there to the polls on that day, or that 45 days, unfortunately, and help keep this governor's seat a Republican, we're all this crazy stuff we're talking about, we could be in trouble. So that, to me, is our job as much as anything, is working to get our next governor of this state to be a Republican again. So those of you that have friends and family or working there, those people, we need those votes that would, they don't vote in that area because they think it's no use, but in a statewide race, it is absolutely important that we get them out and support that situation. So thank you all for everything. Like, again, I really honor being able to represent this district, and please know that when you have an issue on a statewide, get in touch with any of us for our office. That's what we're best at, is trying to get those things worked out for our constituents. Thank you very much.
Got some questions from our audience, and y'all can just decide who wants to dive in on them. Question about school choice. Is that ever going to be something in Virginia, and what does it look like? Is it vouchers, tax credits, scholarships?
Yeah, well, the current situation with it being in the minority, we're not seeing it because it's not making it through the General Assembly. The bills are getting put into play. But if it doesn't make it to the governor's desk, we don't get a hearing. Long story short, and we had a lot of that. It just got killed in education. You never saw it. So.
Okay.
Hey Josh, that was my question. I just want to add one thing. You all brought up the population loss in Virginia.
Yeah.
And I tell you, that's a big issue for population loss in this state. Because a lot of states are going to school choice. And like me, I'm a veteran, and Virginia finally, took my military pension, state income tax last year. You guys did a great job on that. Yeah. I'm telling you, this school choice thing is long-term for Virginia. It's going to be a population loss. It's going to be a killer in this state. Our surrounding states are doing it. So I really hope the Republicans will push this hard.
We still try to champion it. There's a lot of stuff that you don't see that happens in these committees. And let me just stress that, I had this in a write-up, all of you in this room, and I've seen some of you come to see me, and Dolores and Timmy, delegate and senator, come see us. It is very important for you to come see us at the General Assembly. Certainly a letter, a text, an email, those are great. But when you come down to see us and then come testify in a committee meeting, that speaks volumes. It speaks volumes. The skill games, going back to that subject, that room was packed of all these convenience store owners. It was standing room only. There were, thousands. They're just waiting to speak. That had a huge bearing in terms of our vote. So I want to say that to everybody. Thank you.
About the skill games, I know that's a very controversial topic, bill, situation. That was truly a bipartisan bill. We all worked together. Like Bill said, at that point for me, many of you all know, I'll say right up front, I was a co-patron on the Senate side. It's a small business bill for me. I remember back in the days of Doc Trubin fighting against Virginia lottery, okay? And I know the churches in my community and my parents, and we all fought hard to try to prevent lottery from coming in. And since that point, we know where it's went. We can wake up to our telephones and be placing bets. So at this point, to me, it's not about the gamble anymore. It's about business. But that was a bipartisan bill, And I'm working hard on that situation. I don't want to totally use that situation for revenue for Richmond. I want to try to keep that revenue in our communities as much as we can, because when it leaves our communities and goes to Richmond, they tell us it's going to come back, but somewhere it gets lost. And we haven't found that hole over there yet, but we're all looking. But that's what we're working on. But that bill, I will say, that was something that was bipartisan, because you know, it's in all our communities, and so that's that.
Anything done this year for Veterans Affairs or anything like that? That was kind of big stuff, or
Can I speak on the skill
yeah,
games?
go ahead.
Because I just want to tell you, I love these guys, but I voted no. And I did. And I'm going to tell you why I voted no. Because I don't believe that the people who are playing the skill games are the people. We're going to end up taking care of their needs anyway. So all you're doing is taking a red Solo cup, you're taking 3 red Solo cups, and you're just moving the money from one account to the other. So I voted no on skill games because I don't think we need another issue for our young people to have to address in terms of, you know, what they might get addicted to. There were not enough guardrails around it for young people. So I just want to let you know that I love these guys, but I voted no because I don't want Virginia to become casino heaven. And so anyway, and it was just more. If you want to be an adult and play on your computer, that's up to you. But when you go in to buy a gallon of milk and you spend the money on the skill games before you leave, we're going to end up having to buy the gallon of milk. So anyway. So what was the question about the veterans?
Just the question was there any activity at all basically in about veterans issues this year in Richmond? Last year it seems pretty active, but this year
I didn't see a lot of veterans issues raised this year. Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the only thing that I saw that I had concern from some veterans that contacted me, and that was through appropriations, and this is an issue. So there are caveats if you have kids, you're a veteran, you have kids going to college. You can get them into school, and there's a huge discount. There's a lot, it's very watered down. So we're getting a lot of kids are getting into school that really don't deserve to be getting into school with that discount. So we're putting that, the governor is putting that into a study, which we need to do. A lot of colleges are now sucking, you know, it's a huge cost for them, and it's impacting us indirectly. So,
Like $20 million.
yeah, it's a huge cost. So we're going to try to study that.
And it's, you know, I think that's kind of intended for your associate and your bachelor's degree and things like that. Well, it's going into masters and doctors and things like that, doctorates and things like that. So it's gotten to how do you manage it, you know, and then it kind of turns into free higher education for some, and then what do you do for the others? So it's something that we're struggling with. I did have another veteran thing on one of my committees, and I'm sorry, but I can't bring it to. But I think it passed. It was pretty good bill, and it passed. I'm sorry. I'll try to figure out what that was, or maybe get it to you.
If 81 funding actually came down the pipeline, what would that look like? What would we see? 81 improvements, like what does that mean?
I'm going to start and let Bill finish. Bill's been working on 81, been working with the system longer. One thing that was told to me by our governor in our meeting is there is money there to be working on 81, okay? So it's not all a money problem. The problem is to get the great big companies that are going to do the work, you have to do enough of it at one time to get the ones that are going to come in here and do the work. And a lot of the companies that do the bridges versus doing the dirt work aren't the same, and it's just trying to figure out what they're going to do it. Now, there's not enough money to start at West Virginia and go to Bristol and make it everything that we want. But I guess on how it would look is, I think what we're going to see as citizens is the bridge work has to happen first. And that's going to disrupt not only 81, but all of our towns and county roads, because I think it's somewhere around 80% of the bridges need to be replaced. And that's overpasses and underpasses. And so if you take I call it the mall exit here at Winchester, and you have to replace that bridge, just look at the disruption to 81 and the city of Winchester. Well, if we're going to do that one, then we can't, we got to do that and let the traffic go again. So it's going to be stair-stepped along the I-81 corridor. And so the reason why we're not getting started, none of us up here don't know. I've been told it's not only the money. There's studies and logistics, and they're just not doing it. The VDOT's just not prioritizing it.
So to fill in some of the areas that he spoke to, and he's certainly right, we do have manpower issues. VDOT and the third-party groups, meaning the civil engineering groups that help. So they hired out to third-party groups to do all the engineering work. They are having issues getting people to actually propose on projects. But to the point in terms of the projects that are slated, yes, we have projects, we have the money. We're just, in terms of priority and where the issues are, we're not if you can believe it, we're not on the top. We're not, it's the mountainy areas where it's getting done. So to go back to speeding up the projects and that sort of thing, if you remember, I talked with you guys about the PPA opportunity. It just didn't work. Financially, it did not work. We talked about how much it costs. Guys, it's $35 million to do 1 lane mile. Put that in perspective. Take 105 miles one way, that times 2, times 35. How big is that number? Huge, right? So to finance that, these concierges to do these private-public partnerships, the numbers just don't work. So now we're back to the drawing board in terms of how to find funding. So that's where we're trying to fill in the gaps, to speed up projects and to get other projects added in. So I think what you're going to see is, over the next 10 years, you're going to have basically, I call it an accordion effect. It's going to ebb and flow. It's going to go 3 lanes, 2 lanes, 3 lanes, 2 lanes. So it alleviates that pressure in terms of congestion over time. Truck traffic's going to continue to grow. The population is going to continue to grow, but at least that's the goal right now in terms of alleviating some of the pain and issues with 81.
You kind of touched on this, but I think when the lottery issue came out, it was supposed to be that money was supposed to be earmarked for education over time. Is that still true? Is that money actually earmarked for education? And if not, where's all that money going?
Yeah, it's still allocated. I can't give you a percentage in terms of the monies, but those monies are earmarked specifically for education, a percentage thereof, yes. I can't speak to specifics on that, though.
What about, another question, are there any Democrats that will caucus with Republicans to form a majority in the future? And just how polarizing is the environment in Richmond?
If you ran as an independent, I don't know what caucus you would go to.
You'd be sitting on a folding bell chair.
You'd be sitting out in the hallway. It's either you're red or you're blue. And you go, so we to go back to that question, we have committee meetings, just kind of give you guys an idea of what we do every day. Not many people know this. So in the mornings, we get there early in the morning, we have committee meetings throughout the morning that we serve on, or that you have a bill to present, so you're bouncing between committee meetings. And then if you're not doing that, you're back in your office talking to lobbyists or constituents or business people coming to talk to you about their bills or whatever needs they have. Answering phones, talking to people, and it's constant. And then at lunch, you'd be lucky to get lunch at the session when you go in to vote on bills on the floor. Those are once those bills get through from committee to go to the floor. They get heard 3 times. They get voted on. Then that afternoon, we do it all over again. Committees, meetings, committee meetings, meetings. And then that evening, we go out with people and we talk to them about their bills. And we get home about 10 o'clock, and then you do it again the next day. So when people say, well, how do you guys come together as a caucus? Well, what we do is before session starts at noon, we go to our respective caucus meetings. The leader of our caucus, the Republican leader, stands up, and then we have 2 other leaders, and we go over bills for that session. when we go to the floor. And we figure out how we're going to vote. So we make sure we have the majority or the minority or whatever the votes to get to vote against. And we kind of talk about those bills, educate people that served on that committee to get them to understand what that bill's about in layman's terms. Guys, we go through 3,000 bills?
It was 2,300.
2,300. So we got to go through them quick.
You know, and one thing everybody needs to know is, you know, bill comes up over there, might be a great bill. If it comes up in their committees and it gets killed in their committees, it's done. I never even get to see it. And the same thing, the bills that I work with, you know, the committees, the committees on our side's 15. I don't know how many is on your all side. 21. So, and you know who puts the people on the committees? The Democrats. They're in charge. So if you're lucky on the Senate side, you have 8 Democrats and 7 Republicans. We have some committees that are 10 Democrats and 5 Republicans. They could make them 15 Democrats if they want. They're in charge, okay? So if it gets killed, talking about your, you know, like school choice, if it get killed anywhere, it's done. So then what happens is you go try to get it in, I learned this, you try to get it in the language of the budget. You know, if it's in the language of the budget, well, then you're going to Senate Finance and or appropriations for you all. It is chaos. But, you know, we're working. I mean, there was a situation in Clark County, and this meeting's getting long, and it's getting long for me, so I'm sure it's getting long for you all. There was a situation in Clark County. The state agreed to take a farm called Claremont Farm, and it was going to be for education and history, okay? And a barn burnt down. This is state property. It's like a state park, you might as well say. And they had insurance on it, state insured, for $1.6 million. I got a lot of barns. I can have a nice barn for $1.6 million. So I don't know what burnt down, but anyway, it's going to take $3 million to build this barn back, okay? They've been working on it for, I think, 5 years, trying to get the remaining of the money so they can use the $1.6 million that they have. I mean, now I think this is ridiculous money, but nonetheless, the state adopted this baby in Clark County. We said we wanted it for preservation, education, history, all this. At that point, you've agreed to raise it, okay? And I sold this to my colleagues in the Senate. Well, it died over there. So we come back and we get it in the language of the budget. And to my knowledge, although I don't like the figure, we're going to get that done this year. But it took a lot of work. It took a lot of walking up to the 13th floor to go to the big house and explaining, we got to get this off our chest, because if we don't, I'm going to be right back here next year trying to take care of this situation.
So I serve Clark County as well, and I put in that budget amendment as well for Claremont Farm, and they killed mine and kept his.
She didn't go to 13th floor quick enough.
I didn't make it, but here's the crazy thing. The reason that it's going to cost $2.9 million is because it's a state building, and that should give you a lot of indication about how our money is being spent. $2.9 million because it has to have ADA compliant bathrooms. It has to have, this is a barn. Yeah, it has to have all of these different levels that are required by the state. So a barn should cost, what, $800,000 maybe? So you're paying $2.2 million more for a barn because the state requires that it meets all of these standards. And then you have to have architectural and engineering design the barn. So that'll just give you the complications of how government is so bureaucratic that what should cost less than $1 million now costs $3 million.
I'm having to call it on that. Quite a few more good questions I just didn't get a chance to get to, but I want to thank you guys so much for your service to our communities, to our state, and for what you're doing down there. It's a hard fight being in the minority, so thanks for what you're doing. If they have time, stick around. If I didn't get your questions, maybe you guys can snag them before you go. But round of applause again for these folks.